I can't picture a successful life with you, my fiancé said while scrolling through luxury vacation photos beside me. I didn't defend myself or argue. 10 months later, she accidentally found my interview discussing the life she once said was impossible for me. I just can't picture a successful life with you. She said it casually, like she was reading a caption on a photo. I didn't answer. Instead, I set my coffee cup down on the nightstand. Very slowly, I looked at her hands, fingers scrolling, screen glow on her face, unbothered. That's when I realized she hadn't even looked up when she said it. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply stood up, walked to the window, and stared at the Manhattan skyline like I was memorizing it. I thought I was just leaving a bad moment behind. Months later, I'd realize I had changed all of our lives. I lost the version of myself that needed her approval that night. I believed, for years, that her confidence in me was the foundation I was building on. I trusted that what we had was real enough to survive doubt. What I didn't know was that this wasn't the beginning of the problem. It was already the end. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I was 31. We'd been together 3 years, engaged for 7 months. She worked as a senior analyst at a hedge fund in Midtown. I ran a small environmental consulting firm out of a shared office in Brooklyn. We lived in her apartment on the Upper East Side. That's all you need to know. Her name was Stephanie, and if you'd met her at a dinner party, you would have understood immediately why I fell for her. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and made everyone else feel like they were auditioning. Sharp, polished, certain about everything, including, apparently, what I was worth. We'd been having a quiet Sunday morning, the kind that used to feel like a luxury. Coffee, late light coming through the curtains, her legs across my lap on the couch. She was scrolling through a travel account on Instagram. Santorini, Maldives, some villa in Tuscany with a pool that hung over a cliff. Can you imagine? She murmured. Sure, I said. Give me a couple years. That's when she said it. I just can't picture a successful life with you. No anger in her voice. No hesitation. Just fact delivery. The same tone she used when she said the grocery store was out of her specific brand of sparkling water. I remember thinking, is she actually talking to me right now? I turned to look at her. She was still scrolling. At the time, I told myself she was just venting, that she was stressed about a deal at work, that people say things they don't mean on quiet Sunday mornings. Looking back, I should have paid much closer attention to what she didn't say next, because she didn't take it back. Not then, not ever. The silence between us stretched for almost 4 minutes. I counted, not because I was dramatic about it. I just noticed the clock on the cable box when I finally stood up. I'm going to take a walk, I said. Okay, she said, still scrolling. I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door. The one she always said made me look like a grad student who couldn't afford a real coat. I put it on anyway, and I walked out of that apartment and down 6 flights of stairs without using the elevator. Something I'd never done before. Outside, the city was doing what it always did, moving forward without waiting for anyone to feel ready. I walked for almost 2 hours. Not dramatically, not stewing, just thinking. About the firm, about the 3 contracts I was close to closing, about the proposal I'd been building quietly for 8 months, a regional infrastructure assessment project that, if it landed, would change everything about my trajectory, about whether Stephanie had ever actually believed in me, or whether she'd been waiting for a reason to say that out loud. That wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was realizing, somewhere around the corner of 72nd and Columbus, that I wasn't surprised. I want to tell you about Eric. He was my business partner and, more importantly, my closest friend since we were roommates at Cornell. Where I was methodical, Eric was combustible. Where I was quiet about ambition, he announced it before he'd even started. We balanced each other in a way that actually worked. He'd been telling me for 2 years that Stephanie didn't respect what I was building. She talks about your job like it's a hobby, he told me once, after a dinner where she'd spent 20 minutes explaining hedge fund mechanics to our table like a TED Talk no one had requested. She's just proud of her work, I said. There's proud, and then there's using every conversation to remind everyone else where they rank, Eric said. I dismissed it. I was good at that. That night, after the walk, I called him. She said she can't picture a successful life with me. Silence on his end. Then, say that again. I did. More silence. What did you say back? He asked. Nothing. I went for a walk. He exhaled slowly. Good. Don't say anything. Don't fight about it. Just listen to what that tells you. It tells me she's stressed. It tells you, Eric said carefully, that she's already made a decision about you, and she's comfortable saying it to your face. That's not stress. That's a conclusion. I didn't want to believe him, but something shifted that night. I couldn't explain it then. Something felt wrong in the way that only the truth can feel wrong, because you already knew it, and you just didn't want to. I went home that evening, and Stephanie had ordered Thai food. She'd gotten my usual without asking. She handed me the container with a small smile, like the morning hadn't happened. Long walk, she said. Yeah. You okay? Yeah. And we ate dinner watching a documentary about Formula One that she'd picked because she knew I liked it. And for a moment, I let myself believe that maybe Eric was wrong. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just what long-term relationships felt like. Friction and repair, over and over until you either built something stronger or you didn't. I told myself we were building something stronger. I should have looked more carefully at what we were actually building. 3 weeks later, Stephanie's firm held their annual fundraiser gala, a charity event, one of those polished Manhattan affairs where the charity is technically the point, but the networking is really the point. I wore the one suit I owned that she approved of. Navy, well-fitted, pocket square she'd picked out. I looked fine. I knew how to navigate these rooms. Her colleagues were there. Her boss, a formidable woman named Kimberly who ran the macro desk and had the energy of someone who'd stopped suffering fools sometime in her early 30s. Kimberly had always been cordial to me. Curious, even. She'd asked thoughtful questions about environmental consulting the first time we met. What the actual demand looked like, where the growth was, whether the regulatory shifts were opening up new markets. That night, she found me at the bar while Stephanie was across the room with a group of analysts. How's the firm? Kimberly asked. Growing, I said. Slowly, but intentionally. She nodded. Stephanie mentioned you're working on something larger. Infrastructure. I paused. I hadn't told Stephanie the details of the proposal yet. So either she'd been paying more attention than I thought, or she'd been discussing my work with her boss in ways I wasn't aware of. There's a regional project I've been developing, I said carefully. Still in proposal stages. Kimberly tilted her head slightly. Environmental compliance assessment? For the northeastern grid expansion. I felt my pulse tick up once. Something in that space, yes. Interesting timing, she said. There's significant capital moving toward that sector right now. Regulatory tailwinds. Are you looking for institutional partners? I looked at her. I couldn't tell if this was small talk or something else entirely. I'm open to conversations, I said. She handed me her card. Her direct line was handwritten on the back. Call me Thursday, she said, and walked away. I stood there holding that card for a long moment. Looking back, that conversation would end up being the first thread of something I hadn't seen coming. But that night, I didn't say a word about it to Stephanie. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe I was protecting the possibility. Maybe I just didn't want to hear her explain why it probably wouldn't go anywhere. 2 days later, Stephanie and I had dinner with her friends, a regular rotation of finance and law types who all lived within a 12-block radius and vacationed in the same 5 places. Her closest friend, Rachel, was there. Rachel was sharper than she let on and had always been quietly kind to me in a way that felt genuine rather than performed. The conversation turned to a mutual acquaintance, someone in real estate who'd just closed a major deal and was apparently buying a place in the Hamptons. Good for him, someone said. It was a lucky deal, someone else replied. Right place, right time. It's always luck with those guys, Stephanie said, refilling her wine. Or they marry into it. She laughed. Rachel glanced at me. Just briefly. I kept my expression neutral. Or they build it, I said, conversationally. No edge. Stephanie looked at me with an expression I can only describe as fond tolerance. The look you give someone who says something sweet but slightly naive. Sure, babe, she said, and turned back to the table. Rachel looked at her wine glass. Something I hadn't noticed before came into focus in that moment. The way Stephanie diminished things wasn't aggressive. It was gentle, patient, like she was managing expectations on my behalf, because she'd already decided what my ceiling was, and she was trying to help me be comfortable with it. I smiled and let the dinner continue. But something in me had gone very quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't peace. The kind that comes right before a decision. Thursday, I called Kimberly. The conversation lasted 47 minutes. I won't pretend I wasn't nervous going in. Kimberly was not a warm-up audience. But somewhere around the 15-minute mark, the nerves dissolved and it became something else. The kind of conversation where both people realize they're actually talking about something real. She asked rigorous questions. I gave rigorous answers. By the end, she said, I want you to come in and present to our infrastructure team. Formal meeting. Bring your full proposal. I said yes. I hung up the phone and sat at my desk in the Brooklyn office for about 3 minutes without moving. Eric came in with 2 coffees, took one look at me, and said, "What happened?" I told him. He put both coffees down, pulled up a chair, and said, "Okay, we have work to do." That was October. I didn't tell Stephanie about the meeting. She would have asked how it came about. And I wasn't ready to explain how her boss had handed me her direct number at a gala while Stephanie was across the room describing my career as a series of lucky almosts. I wasn't hiding it. I was protecting the space I needed to think clearly. That's what I told myself. At the time, I thought the distinction mattered. I'm not sure it did. November was a blur. Eric and I worked on the proposal the way you work on something when you know, deep in your gut, that it's the most important thing you've ever built. Late nights in the office. Takeout boxes stacked on the conference table. Spreadsheets I could recite from memory. Environmental impact models. Regulatory compliance frameworks. Cost-benefit projections that stretched out 5, 10, 15 years. It was the clearest I'd felt in years. While all of that was happening, Stephanie and I continued our routine. Dinners. Weekend plans. The occasional conversation about wedding venues she'd been looking at online. She showed me a venue in Connecticut once. Renovated estate. Beautiful grounds. Looked like something from a magazine. "What do you think?" she asked. "It's beautiful. It's expensive," she said. "But my parents could contribute, and if she paused. "Well, we'd have to talk about realistic budget." Realistic budget. Said in the voice she used when she was being practical at my expense. I looked at the photo on her phone. "Book a tour," I said. She looked at me with that same expression. "We don't need to rush it." "I'm not rushing it. I'm saying if you like it, look at it." She set the phone down and changed the subject. Looking back, she didn't believe I could afford it. She was already adjusting the plan to fit what she thought I was capable of. And I was sitting across the table from her, 3 weeks from presenting a proposal that could rewrite everything, saying nothing. The presentation was in early December. Kimberly had assembled 6 people, partners, analysts, a legal advisor. Eric and I walked in at 9 a.m. We walked out at 11:40 a.m. In the elevator going down, Eric looked at the floor numbers changing and said, very quietly, "That was it. That was the moment." "We don't know yet," I said. "I know," he said. He was right. For days later, Kimberly called. They were moving forward. Not a small engagement. A full partnership. Our firm embedded as the primary environmental compliance consultant for a multi-phase infrastructure project spanning 4 states. The contract value, over 3 years, was more than everything my firm had built in its entire existence. I sat with that information for 2 hours before I told Eric. When I did, he went outside and called his mother. I'm not sure what he said to her, but he was out there for 20 minutes, and he came back with red eyes and a grin that wouldn't stop. I called my father that night. He'd been skeptical when I started the firm. Not unkind. Just cautious in the way that men of his generation are cautious when they watch their children choose uncertain paths. When I told him, he went quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I always knew you'd get there. I just didn't want to say it too early." I laughed. It was the most relief I'd ever heard in his voice. That night, I went home to Stephanie's apartment. She was on a work call in the bedroom. I stood in the kitchen and looked around the apartment that I'd been living in for 2 years, her art on the walls, her furniture, her name on the lease. And I realized something I hadn't let myself fully see before. I had been living inside her version of my life. Not mine. I told her the next evening. We were having dinner. She'd cooked, which she only did when she was in a particularly good mood about something. "I have news," I said. She looked up. I told her about Kimberly, the presentation, the contract. I gave her the full shape of it, the scope, the partnership, the numbers. She listened, very still. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Kimberly reached out to you at the gala?" She gave me her card. "Yes. And you didn't tell me." I didn't want to talk about it before it was real. She nodded slowly. I could see her processing. "That's a significant contract," she said carefully. "Yes. And you and Eric can actually manage the scope? You're not overpromising." And there it was. Not congratulations. Not excitement. Not even a simple, "I'm happy for you." The first response was a risk assessment. A quiet check on whether I was overestimating myself. I watched her face, and I understood, with a clarity that felt almost clinical, that this was not a woman who had been waiting for me to prove her wrong. This was a woman who had already decided and was now trying to integrate new information into a framework that couldn't fully accept it. "We can manage it," I said. "Okay," she said. "That's great." "Really?" She smiled. It was a nice smile. It just didn't reach anything real. Something had shifted. I could feel it in the way the room held the air differently. I didn't say anything else. I finished dinner. I helped clear the table. I went to bed. And I lay there in the dark thinking about the sentence she'd said 3 months ago on a quiet Sunday morning, like she was reading a caption on a photo. "I just can't picture a successful life with you." The following week, Eric and I signed the contract. After, we went to a bar in Dumbo and had 2 drinks and didn't talk much. We didn't need to. When he dropped me off that evening, he said, "So what happens now?" I knew he wasn't asking about the contract. "I don't know yet," I said. "You deserve someone who is excited," he said. I didn't answer, but I thought about it the whole ride up. Christmas came. We spent it with Stephanie's family in Connecticut. Her parents were gracious and warm. Her father, a retired attorney named Bradley, had always treated me with a specific kind of careful respect, like he was keeping his verdict open until the evidence was in. That Christmas, something changed in how he looked at me. We talked for an hour in his study after dinner. He'd been following infrastructure investment trends, apparently had friends in that sector. He knew what the regulatory environment looked like right now. And when I described the partnership, I saw it happen in real time. The slight recalibration. The updated verdict. He poured me a scotch and said, "You built this the right way. From the ground up." "Tried to," I said. "Stephanie know how significant this is?" I took a slow sip of scotch. "I think she's getting there," I said. He nodded. Didn't push. But something in his expression suggested that he understood more than I'd said. That night, Stephanie's mother pulled me aside in the kitchen. "She's lucky, you know," she said simply. I smiled. "I think we both got lucky," I said, but I didn't fully mean it. And for the first time, I let myself sit with that. January. The project launched. Our firm expanded. 3 new hires, a second office space, partnerships with 2 engineering subcontractors. My days became structured around things that mattered. The work was hard in the way that good work is hard. Demanding, sometimes overwhelming, but feeding something rather than draining it. Stephanie and I were polite. That's the most accurate word. Polite. We still ate dinner together most nights. We still made plans. But there was a layer of glass between us that neither of us had put there intentionally, and neither of us had figured out how to remove. She asked about the project regularly. Careful, measured questions. I answered them. But I noticed I stopped volunteering things. I stopped coming home with the energy of someone who wanted to share good news. I just answered her questions. And one evening in late January, she looked at me across the dinner table and said, "You seem far away." "I'm just tired," I said. She nodded. She believed me. Or she chose to. At the time, I thought I was telling the truth. Looking back, I was already half gone. February. Rachel, Stephanie's friend, texted me. Out of nowhere. "Hey, I know this is weird, but can we talk?" I stared at the message for a while. Then I wrote back. "Sure." When? We met for coffee near her office in Chelsea. Rachel was direct in the way that people are direct when they've been rehearsing something. "I don't want to get in the middle of anything," she started. But, she wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "Stephanie talks about you sometimes. With us. The friend group." "Okay. And the way she talks about you." Rachel paused. "It's not mean. She's not cruel about it. But she frames your work like it's a long shot. Like she's being realistic with us on your behalf. And I've been watching her do that for 2 years, and I kept thinking she'd stop once you." She stopped herself. "Once I what?" Rachel looked at me steadily. "Once you proved it." I was quiet. "And now you have," she said. "And I watched her at Christmas when you talked about the contract, and she just recalibrated." She didn't celebrate. She recalibrated. "Why are you telling me this?" Rachel thought about it. "Because I think you're a good person who has been slowly convinced you're a smaller thing than you are. And I think you already know it. And I think you're about to make a decision. And I wanted to say, whatever you decide, you're not wrong about what you've been seeing." I didn't say anything for a moment. "She loves you," Rachel added. "In whatever way she's capable of." I believe that. "I believe it too," I said. "But love isn't always enough." "No," I said. "It isn't." We finished our coffees. I thanked her. I walked back to the subway and stood on the platform and thought about everything she'd said. I didn't feel validated. I felt sad. The kind of sad that settles in when you finally admit something you've been gently refusing to look at. That night, I didn't go home. I went to the office. I sat at my desk until midnight. Not working, just thinking. I thought about the Sunday morning, the casual certainty. I just can't picture a successful life with you. I thought about the gala and the way she'd talked about my work to her colleagues before I was in the room. I thought about the dinner table, the recalibration, the precise, carefully calibrated absence of wonder. I thought about what it meant to spend the rest of your life with someone who had already decided what you were. I thought about my father's voice when I told him about the contract. I always knew you'd get there. And I made a decision. Not angrily, not dramatically, just quietly, with the window dark and the building silent and the city doing what it always did outside. I came home at midnight. Stephanie was awake. She was sitting up in bed with her laptop, and she looked at me when I came in. I got worried, she said. I know. I'm sorry. I sat on the edge of the bed. I've been thinking, I said. And something in my voice, some frequency, made her close the laptop. I don't think we should get married, I said. She didn't speak for a very long time. Because of what I said, she finally said. In January. In October, I said. On a Sunday morning. She closed her eyes. I was stressed. I was in a bad place with work and Stephanie. She stopped. You didn't say something you didn't mean, I said. You said something you've been thinking for a long time. And I think part of me has known that for a while. And I think you have too. She looked at me. And for the first time in a long time, the careful composure wasn't there. She looked like the version of herself that existed before she learned to perform confidence as a shield. I love you, she said. I know, I said. That's real. I know that too. Then, it's not enough, I said gently. Not when one of us has already decided who the other one is and isn't going to change that. She didn't argue. I think some part of her knew I was right. The silence stretched. Where will you go? She asked. I'll figure it out. I moved out over the following weekend. Nathan, a friend from the Brooklyn days who'd recently bought a 2-bedroom in Park Slope, let me stay with him while I found a place. I didn't take much. The jacket she always said made me look like a grad student who couldn't afford a real coat. My work files. A photo of my father and me from when I was 12 at a job site he'd taken me to. That was most of it. I signed a lease on a place in Carroll Gardens in March. Small. Quiet. Mine. I painted the living room a dark green that I liked and that nobody had an opinion about. I bought a coffee table that was slightly too big for the space, and I didn't care. I worked. The project expanded ahead of schedule. By April, we were being discussed in industry publications, not as the interesting new firm, but as the firm that was rewriting what environmental compliance consulting could look like at scale. Eric kept forwarding me articles with messages like, "This is us, just so you're aware." I hired a director of operations. I brought in a communications consultant named Jordan who had spent a decade in infrastructure policy and understood our space with the kind of depth that changed how we told our story publicly. Jordan was the one who suggested the interview. A podcast, one of the serious ones, focused on sustainable infrastructure and the capital side of environmental compliance. Not a vanity project. A genuine conversation about the work. You've been quiet publicly, Jordan said. That's fine for a while. But you're big enough now that silence starts to look like avoidance. Tell the story. I thought about it. Okay, I said. The interview was recorded in May. It ran in early June. I didn't know Stephanie heard it until Rachel told me. Rachel texted me on a Tuesday evening. She found your podcast interview. I stared at the message. How? Her boss, Kimberly, shared it in their team Slack. Said something like, "This is the kind of long game thinking you should understand." Stephanie saw her name. Well, your name. In the channel and listened to it. I sat with that for a moment. Kimberly, who had handed me her card at a gala, who had asked rigorous questions, who had never once asked whether I was overestimating myself. How is she? I asked Rachel. A pause before she responded. She's okay. I think she finally heard how you talk about what you built. On your own terms. Without anyone filtering it through what they expected from you. I didn't respond for a minute. She asked me if you were seeing anyone, Rachel added. What did you say? I told her I didn't know. Which is true. Thank you for telling me, I said. I put the phone down, and I sat in my 2-big coffee table living room in Carroll Gardens and felt something complex and quiet. Not triumph. Not vindication. Just the particular stillness of a thing that has finally, completely, resolved itself. The interview had run about 45 minutes. The host had asked me, somewhere around the halfway point, about what the early days of building the firm looked like. I talked about it honestly. The uncertainty, the lean years, the clients who passed, the proposals that didn't land, the slow accumulation of trust in an industry that moved carefully. He'd asked, was there ever a moment you doubted the direction you were going? And I'd said, there was a period where someone I was close to couldn't see it, couldn't picture it, the version of this I was building toward. And I think for a long time I let that become part of how I saw myself. The doubt became familiar. When I finally stopped letting someone else's limited imagination set the ceiling for mine, everything changed. Not overnight, but directionally, permanently. I hadn't said her name. I hadn't needed to. I wonder if Stephanie recognized it. I think she did. She called once. A Thursday evening in late June. I was on my way back from a site meeting in New Jersey, train windows dark with the tunnel under the river. Her name on my screen. I watched the phone until it stopped. She didn't leave a voicemail. I didn't call back. Eric and I had dinner that Friday. He'd heard the interview, and he was characteristically insufferable about it in the best possible way, quoting lines back at me, doing an exaggerated impression of the host's voice, generally making it impossible to be serious about anything. After the second drink, he got quieter. You good? He said. Yeah, I said. Actually, yeah. The firm is about to be something significant, he said. You know that, right? I know. And you built it when nobody. Eric. When someone who was supposed to believe in you. Eric. He stopped. Smiled. You're good, he said. I'm good, I said. And I meant it in a way that felt new. Not like recovery. Like a rival. In August, we closed a second major contract. A partnership with a municipal authority in the Mid-Atlantic region, expanding our scope into urban environmental planning. Jordan drafted a press release. I reviewed it at my kitchen table on a Saturday morning, coffee in hand, the too big coffee table catching the early light. The press release opened with the firm's name. Then a quote from me. I read it once and thought, quietly, without drama, about a Sunday morning on the Upper East Side. A woman scrolling through photos of places she wanted to go. A sentence delivered without looking up. The sound of a coffee cup being set down very slowly on a nightstand. The distance between who someone thinks you are and who you actually are. How much time you can spend living in that gap without realizing you've made it your home. I signed off on the press release. I refilled my coffee. I opened the proposal for a new project, something bigger than anything we'd done yet. And I started to read. Stephanie texted me once more. September. I heard your interview. I owe you an apology I don't know how to give properly. I'm sorry. I read it. I held the phone. I thought about what to say for a long time. Then I put the phone in my pocket, and I went back to work. Rachel told me later, months after, that Stephanie had taken a role in London. A promotion, by all accounts. Good move for her career. Exactly the kind of decisive, forward momentum choice that Stephanie was always capable of when the path was clear to her. I was glad. I meant that genuinely. She was formidable. She always had been. She just hadn't been able to see that in me. And I had spent too long trying to make my ambition small enough for her framework to contain it. We were both better now. Different cities. Different futures. The version of the life we might have built together, that careful, recalibrated, managed expectations life, was never going to be the right size for either of us. I understood that now without bitterness. Just clarity. The firm crossed a milestone in October. A year after I'd first walked into Kimberly's conference room with a proposal and a partner and the specific kind of focus you develop when someone you love has quietly told you they don't believe you're capable of more. Eric and I didn't market with anything formal. We just worked late on a Tuesday, ordered pizza, and talked about the next phase. Somewhere around 9 o'clock, he looked up from his laptop and said, "We're going to need more space." "I know," I said. "Bigger office." "Yeah. New hires." "Already thinking about it." He nodded, went back to his screen. Then, after a minute, "She called you, right? After the interview." "Once," I said. "You didn't answer." "No." "Good," he said. "Flat. Final." And we went back to work. There's something I want to say, not as a lesson, not as a conclusion, just as a thing that's true. The hardest part of that whole year wasn't the breakup. It wasn't the fear of what I was building toward, or the loneliness of a new apartment, or the long nights in the office running projections I wasn't sure would ever close. The hardest part was recognizing how long I had let someone else's diminished vision of me become the background noise of my own ambition. How many small moments, a dinner table comment, a recalibration where enthusiasm should have been, a carefully managed, realistic conversation, had I absorbed and processed and filed under she's just being practical when what they really were was evidence. Evidence of a ceiling someone had built over me that I had to stop trying to raise and start walking out from under entirely. I don't know if Stephanie was doing it consciously. I don't think she was cruel. I think she saw what was in front of her and made a calculation, quietly, privately, sincerely, and then lived by that calculation even when it stopped being true. The problem isn't that she was wrong about what I was. The problem is that I stayed long enough to start believing her. That's the part one have to own. My father came to visit in November. We had dinner at a restaurant near my apartment. Nothing fancy, just somewhere with good food and no need to perform anything. He asked about the firm. I told him where we were. He listened the way he always listened, carefully, without interruption, nodding slowly. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You seem different." "Different how?" He thought about it. "Like yourself," he said. I looked at him. "Like yourself again," he repeated. "The way you were before you started dressing for other people's weather." I laughed. He smiled. The small, contained kind he'd always done when he meant something that was too big to state plainly. We finished dinner. He paid, which he always insisted on regardless of circumstance. Outside on the sidewalk, before he got into his cab, he put a hand on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you," he said. Simple, direct, nothing managed about it. I stood on the sidewalk after his cab pulled away and the city moved around me and the late autumn air came off the water a few blocks east. I thought about a Sunday morning. A woman who couldn't picture it. A coffee cup set down slowly. A walk taken without drama. A decision made in silence. I had thought I was just leaving a bad moment. I had changed everything instead. Not by fighting. Not by proving anything. Just by refusing to stay small. Just by building, quietly, stubbornly, completely, the thing they said I couldn't. And then letting the work speak for itself. She never called again. I never answered anyway. Some things end not with a door slamming, but with a door simply no longer being there. You look back and the hallway you used to walk down is just a wall now. Solid. Permanent. And you realize you haven't missed it in a very long time. By then, I was already somewhere else entirely.